Hey, good afternoon. It's P.J. Norwood for today's Fire Engineering Humpday Hangout for June 23rd. And as always, we have a great show lined up today. Today, we're going to dive into some specific tactics. We're going to be talking about machinery rescue. Unfortunately, Chief Halton is not able to join us today, so he asked me to make mention of a few important topics before we get started today. First, as we all know, FDIC is right around the corner, August 2nd through the 7th. Chief Halton wanted to make sure that you understood that the hot classes are filling up rapidly. So if you're attending FDIC and you would like to attend a hot class, make sure you jump online and register today. And if you're not attending FDIC, reconsider. Hop online, register for FDIC 2021, as Chief Halton calls it. It's summer school. Different time of year spent in Indianapolis, and it's going to be a lot of fun this year. And a very different environment being there in August. So we're looking forward to seeing everybody, but register for those hot classes today. Two of the many special events that Chief Halton asked us to talk about today is the FDIC Courage and Valor Run, which is Thursday on the 5th at 6 o'clock at White River State Park. I know firsthand. I know Frank Ricci knows firsthand. I think he was chased by some sort of animal in a suit. Was actually beat during that run by I think it was a kangaroo. We'll find out more information about that. The fun run, the FDIC Courage and Valor Fun Run every year. Beautiful environment, lots of fun. If you're not in the ability to run, you have time to get to that ability, and if not, you can walk. It's about joining everybody, having a little bit of fun along the river walk, the River State Park in Indianapolis for a great cause. And lastly, the 9/11 Memorial Stair Climb that's taking place Friday, August 6th, 1:30 at Lucas Oil Stadium. Chief Halton wants to make sure that he reiterates with this year being in August, the temperature that will be at the higher elevations in Lucas Oil Stadium. He's requesting no turnout gear this year. So no turnout gear for the 911 Memorial Stair Climb on Friday. Those are only two of the many special, fun, engaged networking events that FDIC hosts, and nothing is changing this year in any of those events except the time of year. So we look forward to spending some time in Indianapolis. It's going to be here before we know it. So make sure you register today, and especially for those hot classes, because they're filling up. So today, as always, we have myself and Frank Ricci together. Frank's in his backyard paradise, and he has a whole host of three great fire service leaders from Connecticut joining him today. We also have Augie Matt joining us. I'm going to go through a quick one sentence or so bio on each one of them, except for a good friend of ours, Tim Papp. We're going to let Frank introduce him. But we're going to get right into a machinery rescue incident that occurred here in Connecticut. We're going to get some firsthand information on that. And then we're going to roll that into training and preparing for these incidents with Augie. So first up, we got Captain Dan. And Dan, I apologize. Katzbik, I apologize if I didn't get the pronunciation right.
He knows who he is.
Yeah, he knows who he is. He's a captain of the rescue company for 34 years in South Windsor. We have Jared Pelletier, also a captain in South Windsor. He's in training. He's an officer on Engine 4. He's been 10 years in South Windsor, as well as a firefighter EMT in Hazardville Fire District in Enfield, Connecticut. And then Augie Matt's a 16-year veteran of Syracuse. He's currently assigned to Engine Company 2, which, as he indicates, we'll have to verify the numbers, but the busiest engine company in the city, located on the north side. But more importantly than that, he's going to talk to us today from Take the Door Training, where he's the owner of that company, where they deliver a 16-hour machinery rescue program, which attributed to the success of incident that we're going to talk about today. So we have Augie Matt joining us today to talk about his class, but also how training and preparation for these low frequency incidents really make a difference on making sure that we're prepared. So Frank, man, I'm jealous that you're sitting in your backyard, especially with that group. But it's all yours. You go ahead and introduce our friend Tim, and let's talk about this great incident.
Well, first, just a couple housekeeping items. I'd like to congratulate P.J. Norwood, who was just promoted to director of the State Fire Training Academy for the entire state of Connecticut. He will be the director of fire training. You know, PJ, I've worked with for years, and he's always projected a consistent set of standards and values. I think he's going to take Connecticut to the next level. And I just like, on behalf of fire engineering, Bobby Halton and the entire FDIC team, congratulate you on that. Matt, Augie, thanks. I follow you on Twitter. You're putting out some great training classes Besides some of your choices of instructors, I've
Very
been nothing but
questionable.
impressed what you put out. So for our listeners out there, make sure you're following Take the Door Training on Twitter. Check out their videos on Facebook. And we're going to talk a little bit about your classes today, but your class actually had a direct impact on making a horrible situation a lot better here in Connecticut. And so, Tim Papp is a rescue captain in the city of New Haven, which is a very urban city. But yet this rescue didn't occur in the big city. This rescue happened in small town America, and every department out there has to be prepared for that. And we're going to delve into that incident and also what it took to be prepared. I'd also like to point one other thing out. Tim's a volunteer chief in that town, and that town benefits from that experience. I had the honor of training Tim Papp from the time he came in as a recruit in the New Haven Fire Department. And it was the first class where we taught RIT. And instead of just being a recruit, Tim immediately became a resource for me because he's calm, he's competent, he's consistent, and he knows what he's doing. I could see those leadership skills in Tim from the moment he was in the academy class. He was the type of person as an instructor that you never had to push forward. You had to hold him back a little. And I've had the honor to see his maturity grow as he grows into a commando officer in the New Haven Fire Department. He's respected by his peers and commando officers. He's earned my highest respect. He's somebody that when I pulled up on a scene of a construction accident, besides his mild attitude, he's somebody that I always wanted to see there because I knew we were going to get the job done right. So, Tim, welcome to Politics and Tactics Show. And again, for anybody out there in America, the unions used to give everybody a hard time about volunteering. And I was a union president. And remember, this is Politics and Tactics, and this is only going to be a very short part. But I believe in the Constitution. I believe in freedom of association. But I also believe that you have a choice. And before, it used to be a mandatory condition of employment to be a member in good standing. The unions benefit when we have chiefs in volunteer departments, when we have volunteers and paid guys serving back and forth, because it's kind of ironic. The paid departments tend to have great staffing and the volunteers tend to have great training to bring in somebody like Augie on a regular basis to provide that quality hands-on training that makes a difference. So both communities benefit. The city department benefits and the volunteer benefits. And this is the last thing I'm going to say before I get off my soapbox and we get into machinery rescue. If your union gives you a problem about volunteering, call Frank Ricci. Frank Ricci will take care of it for you. So that's enough said about that. But here today, you have another individual that's a career firefighter and a volunteer. That experience is going to help out both sides. And in the back here, we have Dan, who's a captain, but he also works in industry. So being a volunteer, tool and die, you said?
Yeah, precision machining.
Precision machining. So who do you want on scene? You want that diverse background. So having somebody that's a true professional that has that background is going to make a difference in any incident. Tim Papp, honor to have you here. And if we could start off by telling us about bringing in Augie and then go into the incident, and then we'll go back to Augie.
All right, sure. Frank, first, thanks for the kind words. Nicest thing you've ever said to me since I've known you for the last 15 years. Getting to know Augie started out with the South Windsor Fire Department. A lot of the young guys were reaching out to me as a training officer. They wanted to do machinery rescue. We had no training in it. We weren't familiar with it, and everyone was asking for it. So I started reaching out to lots of different organizations, lots of different companies, and a good friend of mine, Dan Gordon, who owns Flash Fire Industries, got me hooked up with Augie. Me and Augie spent a little bit of time together on the phone. We clicked, and we figured out that Augie was the right guy for the South Windsor Fire Department. So I brought them in for their first 8-hour program to start. Totally ran with it. We had a nice relationship. From there, we decided to start doing the 16-hour programs with Take the Door, and I moved away from us paying for it to we just hosted the classes. So, Augie, if I'm right, is it 5 or 6 years we've been doing stuff together in South Windsor?
I can't keep track. Probably close to 5.
Yeah. So I started moving forward towards hosting the classes where Augie was very nice to give us free slots in it. but between the members coming up for free slots and the members wanting to take the class, I think I would say 75 to 80% of the South End Fire Department has been through Take the Doors machinery class.
Easily.
So that morning that we had our incident, most of the members who were there had been through the class. It was definitely a help. It definitely prepared us for what we faced that morning. But I think just anybody who wants to do machinery rescue, just have a conversation with Augie, and you'll know what he's going to bring to the table. So.
And Augie, with any technical rescue skill, whether you're doing machinery or high angle or confined space, all those skills kind of come together in different rescue disciplines, correct?
Absolutely. And like anything else, they start with the basics. Going from, you mentioned, it could be rope, something as simple as a family of eights, all the way to, something as simple during machinery rescue, basic mechanical aptitude. That's something that we have to deal with. It's kind of a unique thing nowadays, with people not necessarily coming in from trades or having mechanical aptitude. We kind of have to bring people up to speed. So like you said, yes, kind of all the basics in tech rescue all kind of come together, especially for machinery rescue.
That's because when you tell a kid, let's go play ball, they say, let's get on PlayStation today. So
They get their controller out. Yeah.
Having people with that background is critical. Tim, tell us a little bit about this incident.
So on March 22nd at about 3:30 in the morning, the South Windsor Fire Department was dispatched to a local pasta company in town. It was reported as a hand stuck in the machine. I was scheduled to come on duty at 4 o'clock in the morning. With the South Windsor Fire Department being 100% volunteer, we still maintain a duty officer 24/7. So we make sure there's always an incident commander on or somebody there to deal with regular better smells and bells, or just to be in charge of the incident. I sent a quick text to the guy who was coming off and said, "Hey, I'm already up. I'll take this call for you. Have any experience in doing this at work?" And I felt also being the special operations chief in South Windsor, I was the right guy to go to the call. So like I said, it came in as a hand stuck in a machine. Most of us are very familiar with this facility. It's a 150,000 square foot facility that produces pasta, lots of ammonia on scene, lots of big machines. We've been there very regularly for activated fire alarms. We've done many tours of the facility. So as I went responding, our dispatcher advised me that the workers were trying to reverse the machine. I quickly advised the dispatchers to call back and tell them to stop reversing the machine. There's a little bit of communication problem with them. Our dispatch center told me they're too far in the building, and I politely told them, no, you need to call them back and tell them to stop reversing the machine, which Augie, I'm sure, can get into on why it's so bad. I arrived on scene a few minutes after 3:30. A South Windsor police officer met me at the front door. As I got out of the duty vehicle, I grabbed my Howling bar out of it, thinking it was going to be handed machine. I could do some prying. I could probably have this guy out before the members showed up to the incident. The police officer met me at the front door. He looked at me and said, "Tim, it's bad." And I'm like, "What do you mean it's bad? It's a hand in the machine." His response was, "No, it's not." So we had to walk through a very large facility. We turned the corner, and in all my experience, this is the one time I think where I stopped and was a little bit taken back what I saw. This man was about 6 feet up, standing on a ladder. He was sucked into what's called a paddle mixer. I couldn't see anything but his legs and his body at that point. The workers on scene were starting to dismantle the machine. They had pulled the motor out. We had a quick conversation. They assured me that the stored energy had been released, which was huge for us, knowing that we got to take care of that. They were continuing to try to reverse the machine out even when I arrived. The tough part was, we've all been there trying to get these guys to stop trying to save their buddy. They had the greatest of intentions, but trying to get them to stop was difficult, where I had to become almost yelling at them to do it. As they were trying to reverse the machine out, the victim inside the machine actually spoke when I said, "Stop doing it." And he said, "Yes, please stop doing it. It's hurting real bad. I don't want you to do that anymore." I was amazed that the man was able to talk to me at that point. I had a quick conversation with him. I started to size up the situation. started grabbing all the workers who were familiar with machines, started to gain some information I could. At this point, the engine was showing up with Captain Pelletier as a training officer riding on it that morning. Tried calling him on the radio because it is such a big facility. We had radio issues. Me and Jared worked together, the training division. It was almost like we knew what each other were going to do. When we couldn't have a conversation, I switched to channel 2. He switched to channel 2, our fireground channel, and we were able to have a quick conversation. I advised him to contact the rescue company that we needed our machinery kit, we needed tools. Once they got inside, I kind of turned it over to Captain Pelletier to start coming up with a plan.
Tim, one thing before the plan, whether it's a machinery incident, a hazardous material incident, or any kind of special operations incident, the workers are always going to be a hindrance, just exactly what you experienced in South Windsor. So if you could point those workers in a direction, and I'm not talking about the specific incident, but if you can point those workers to try to help out and put them in a role, it's much better, and you're going to get a much better result than telling them just to stand back. Perfect example is a trench rescue. You know, these guys are used to digging in dirt. If you need the spoil pile move, just give them a task so you can refocus, and you may be able to bring in that expertise. Go ahead, Tim.
I can't agree with you more. So when I got the workers to stop trying to dismantle the machine, the guy who was doing it, I asked him, I said, what is your job in this facility? And he told me, I'm one of the mechanics for the machine. I said, I hate to tell you this, you're not leaving. You're going to stay over there, and you're going to stand next to me most of the time so I can ask questions. We were very lucky that right behind the machine that this man was trapped in was the exact same machine that wasn't being used. So we had a diagram to look at, and I stood there with that guy for a while looking at the machine. When both captains arrived, I took that worker and put them with him and said, talk to him, let's start developing a plan of what we need to do to get this guy out. PJ, if you can bring up the first picture of the machine with the strut, just disregard the strut for the beginning. We'll kind of go into what we faced when we got there.
So while he's pulling that up, what Tim did was brilliant. And you need to do that because on these types of incidents, getting the person that's the subject matter expert to stay right where you need them to be sometimes is like herding cats. And especially if they get a cell phone call or they get a call from the owner and you're dealing with ocean, you're dealing with other things, those people on any type of these incidents tend to walk away. So my recommendation, if you have this type of incident and you have extra personnel, assign a firefighter to stay with the subject matter expert so they don't walk away. I've had that happen to me on a hazmat incident where we told the person to stay at the command post, and next thing you know, they got a phone call and they were gone. And I said, I would never make that mistake again. So if you have extra personnel, assigning somebody with that person sometimes makes sense.
So we'll disregard the strut for now. Captain Kazbek can talk a little bit more about that in a few. So if you look at the machine here, there actually on top of it is a hopper, which will be the next picture that we're going to show. But on that right side is where the step ladder was. The victim was standing on a step ladder. He was reaching over what's called a paddle mixer hopper when loose clothing grabbed his arm and sucked him into the machine. I won't get into in depth of what his injuries were, but they were pretty life-threatening. He suffered injuries to his head, his face. He had multiple impalements. So one paddle mixer we figured out later was through his arm and into his chest, which Captain Pelletier can talk about a little more. But we were faced with a very big challenge at this point. We had a man 6 feet up and trapped in a machine and impaled in a food grade machine. PJ, if you can go to the next picture, just a hopper, and then I'm going to turn it over to these guys to talk a little about what they faced when they got there.
Matt, if I could do this before he gets into the hopper thing, we teach everybody, in these types of incidents, elevators, things of that nature as well, lockout, tag out. But isn't there something that you have to ensure that the machine doesn't have a production order? Now, that's what we called it 20 years ago. I don't know what you're calling it in your classes now, but people have to understand that certain machines will follow the path that they're supposed to go to when you shut them off. I'll give you an example. Winchester Firearms in New Haven had a machine that the piston kind of went this way, but then when you shut off the power, midway, it would finish, it would actually go up and finish it path, which could actually lead to a larger injury. So could you talk a little bit about that lockout tagout? Is that a concern? And
Absolutely. Absolutely. First and foremost, I want to talk, I'll get to that in 1 second, but first I just want to highlight what Tim said. They got someone with subject matter. That's going to be your key, when you're doing all this stuff. Because, you're doing your size up. Is this a rescue? Is this a recovery? And getting someone with that subject matter, someone in charge of maintenance, millwright, someone who operates this thing is huge. And what they did, having a machine close by was great. What does this thing do? Where does it start and where does it finish? What is the process here? Because it may not be as clear as some incidents what the machine does. So like you were saying, yes, certain machinery has a home position or a reset position, exactly what you're stating. So when you do lockout tag out, you shut down all the power sources, it may reset. There's a video out there somewhere, I forget where it was. There was a jarring facility or a canning facility somewhere out in the Midwest, and there were people that were doing lockout tag out to do maintenance on it. It's somewhere on YouTube. I know, death by YouTube. But they went and did lockout tag out, and the conveyor actually lowered and crushed a worker. Terrible event. So when you're bringing things in a zero state, a neutral state with lockout tag out, first of all, understanding the process of what this machine does, where it starts and where it stops, but also capturing what you have already, capturing what you've gained, cribbing, wedges, depending on what you have, maybe some sort of lashing or whatever. If there's a conveyor belt that's going to drop or something, Tim, we talked about struts potentially. There are a whole bunch of different ways to do this, depending on what the machinery is. But this is when talking to the experts in the facility. They deal with this thing every day. They know how this thing works. So asking them, is there a home position or a reset position, or will this thing move when we shut it down? It's definitely key, like you mentioned.
So
Tim?
if we take a look at the hopper, the left side where that bearing is where the waste and the man was sucked down into it. His right arm was sucked into the machine. We believe the first paddle there was impaled into his arm, and then we believe the second paddle was impaled into his chest. That blue motor that they had already released the bolts. The workers were trying to pull that off. When I first got there, the stored energy of that was a huge concern for me. What we could be possibly dealing with if it moved back, or if we start cutting, is it going to move? I had a quick conversation with the worker, and he assured me that when he pulled that motor, there should be no stored energy left in the mixing shaft. We were definitely faced with a very unique situation for us. And we had to develop a plan. So I'm going to kind of turn it over now to Captain Pelletier, because at this point he arrived on scene. We had a quick conversation. I was still trying to gather a lot of incident command stuff, and he kind of took over the initial operations on the scene before Captain Catsback arrived. So I'm sure he has some points that he's going to want to add to this.
Yeah. So also with it being a volunteer department, he's got to jump on the rest of the guys coming. He responds in the command vehicle. He's there a little bit before. The rest of us have to make it to the firehouse first and respond on the apparatus from there. So I came out on engine 4. I believe we had a crew of 3. He mentioned the radio issue we had, but obviously, being a first 2 engine, I don't have all the rescue equipment on the engine. I'm going to bring in hand tools. I'm going to bring in irons. So made the way in. I spoke with Captain Catsback on the radio, letting him know that Chief Pap's radio wasn't making it out of the building and what he wanted brought in as well. As Tim mentioned, we met inside. We spoke briefly, and he went off to kind of establish what else was going on, talk with the workers. I tried to size up the machine. I did notice that there was a similar machine directly behind this one. I didn't know if it was exactly the same one, but I found out later that it was, which was a giant benefit to all of us. In addition to his chest and his armpit, his wrist was also impaled on one of the blades deep down underneath. But we didn't know that until pretty far into the incident. Where his body was on top of the hopper, you could not see all the way down to the machine. It was some time before we kind of figured exactly how he was trapped in there.
He was consumed.
Yes, he was consumed by the machine. He had a head injury as well, and his head was not involved in the machine, but it was hanging down in the machine. One thing Tim already mentioned that I found astonishing was the level of consciousness and alertness that he actually had. In the first 10 minutes or so, being able to kind of talk to my crew and Tim and then the rescues crew when they showed up about the machine. I would say one thing and ask a question to Dan, and the patient would respond from inside the machine. Oh, no, there's paddles, there's blades underneath. I think one's through my wrist. I was like, okay, this might be an asset, being able to talk to him. Unfortunately, you don't know how long that's going to last, especially in the traumatic state he was in. But I kind of slowed down and I wanted to try to, like any scene, size up the machine and figure out what our options are. You mentioned it was a food grade machine. It was food grade stainless steel. The first thought is, yeah, it's metal, sheet metal, cut it up. We found out pretty quickly that wasn't the easiest task. So I think in the first 15 or so, 20 minutes, I spoke with you a number of times, a number of times, and we realized it was going to be more than just a 15 to 20 minute operation. And I think the whole phase there about planning what was going forward was kind of the most important part, even though our plan changed several times throughout the incident.
I would say the first 15 to 20 minutes for us was sizing up, trying to come up with a plan of what we were going to do.
Right.
Like, I can talk about it. Like, we do a lot of the training in these classes. We think we know what we're going to be faced with.
Yeah.
We walked into this, and even on myself, I was like, oh boy. Like,
That was my takeaway.
Chief, I know we're kind of going linear here. What were the EMS considerations and how fast did that get?
so
enacted?
EMS arrived at the same time that I did. There was 3 police officers already on scene when I arrived. 2 of them were in the warehouse or the factory. They were holding, kind of supporting his legs. EMS was there. So in the South Windsor, we have a commercial service that provides EMS for us. We know many of them. The crew that night happened to be a covering crew so we didn't know them. I didn't know how they worked. We had a quick conversation. It was 2 young females. I didn't know their experience level. One was BLS, one was ALS. Even they were kind of taken back with what they dealt with. They climbed up on a machine before these guys arrived. They started to make assumptions or kind of sizable what they needed to do for EMS. And then I believe it was maybe a half hour into the incident, I believe the EMT had a conversation with Captain Pelletier, and they looked at me and said, we need the helicopter, we need lifestars. So in New Haven, as Frank can talk about, we have a thing called the Sharps team. We don't have that up in Hartford County. So for us, we decided that Lifestar was going to be our best resource to get the doctors or nurses or whatever we needed there to help this guy. So we called for Lifestar pretty quick, and that added a whole nother element to the call now for me for incident command. As a volunteer organization, a little short staff, 3:30 in the morning. I knew it was going to be an in-depth rescue. The guys are going to be working. Now I had to figure out a crew to land the bird. I had to figure out a spot. Luckily for us, the pasta location had a giant field, like right outside the door. So we called and we put the bird right there. One of our chiefs is actually a Lifestar dispatcher. So he took over, he showed up on scene and he took over that for me. So that was a huge help. But yeah, so EMS, I mean, even they were, I think, a little taken back by what we were dealing with. But we had a good conversation. I think all of us had a lot of conversations with them throughout the incident.
That was the challenge, though, to take away from those pictures, regardless of dispatch, right? Dispatch made it sound as though we were going to be operating at ground level. So on the way there, obviously, we're all going through our head. All right, bad training, been through this before. How bad can it be? The challenge of working 6 feet off the ground on roller conveyors, step ladders, with the weight and the impalements, et cetera. It was a challenge for EMS. It was a challenge for us, obviously, and it was even a challenge for people that knew the equipment in terms of how you're going to access it. So it was like a perfect storm in terms of the overall environment of what you had to work in. And that was like one of the biggest obstacles. Is okay, we got to plan what we're going to do, but how are you going to be able to put resources around this machine 6 feet in the air and manage this victim?
I think we had a conversation with one of the workers before we put that strut under the conveyor belt, and we asked him, what is this rated for? And the guy was like, pasta. Like, I don't think they knew what it could hold for a weight. So there was concern of both of ours. So that's why we ended up putting that Paratech strut under there. We could only get one, but we were comfortable with getting that one under there to help support the weight, because the guys had to be on that to work to do the operation.
And it was a roller conveyor, right? So even us on top of the machine, right? You were, if you reposition yourself, you rolled down into the bottom of it, right? So we finally got some backboards. We wedged some backboards in there to at least have a solid surface so that we can lean up against and work on. It wasn't wide enough for two of them, so you still kind of had that challenge. But obviously we were just like Jared said earlier. Every time we thought we had a plan, we were probably on our fifth revision by the time we finally got there. But,
One of the points to make also, and kudos to the police officers that he mentioned that were on scene. With him being as elevated he was in the position he was in, with his waist being on the end of that hopper, his legs were hanging off in midair the whole time. I think at least one, or if not two, of the police officers stood holding his legs in the air for the entire 3-hour operation and did not move, which I can't speak for the patient himself, but I can imagine that took literally a load off the patient the entire time, with especially the way he was pinned in there and being pulled back.
So the one thing I took from early on of talking with the workers is that I asked them if the machine was shut off. They assured me the machine was shut off. I told them we need to lock out and tag out, and they said we'll take care of it. Looking back, that was a huge mistake on my point. I trusted that they were going to do it. The machine did stay off the whole time. It was locked out at some point, but I think it took a little bit of time to do it. We eventually cut power to the machine. We just cut the wires. We knew this machine was coming apart, so we just cut the wires to the motor, so we knew we couldn't do that.
Ronald Reagan taught us to trust but verify. So you have to verify everything. And here, this is a lesson for everybody out there. It sucks being on fire engineering and saying, hey, I wish I did this. But that's how we all learn. If you make a mistake out there, you own it and you share it, because there's no such thing as a perfect incident like this. There's always going to be lessons, and we want everybody to learn. We really appreciate you saying that, because that's a lesson that's important for everybody out there.
100%, because there's a lot going through my head. So yeah, definitely, like, I could go down the ICS checklist, but I'm not that guy. I'm going to throw that in a trash can. I'm going to try to remember what I'm supposed to. So after a little while, we came up with our plan. We all had conversations. I assigned Captain Kazbek as the rescue operations officer. Captain Pelletier was helping them. We knew we had to start doing some dismantling. So with that picture you saw of the hopper, we did a cut down of the hopper. And the guys, I didn't even have to tell them to remember shielding or cooling, because of their training they'd received. Before I could even remind them, they had things to shield and cool. We actually we came up with a machinery kit, this little toolbox, and it had these like little yellow like covers for these small compartments. Never thought about it before. They ripped those off of it, and they were using that for the shielding. So I'm sure these guys can agree on this. Once we did the cut down of the hopper, that was when we really got a good look at of kind of like what we needed to do. That's when we realized the extent of the injuries. He also had, when you went in, it had lacerated his face and it had lacerated his neck. The doctors at Hartford Hospital figured out that they believe as he got sucked in, it might have started to pull some of the skin off of his body. But it was still a shock to us. Even then, we could talk to him. The paramedic at that point, I think, was working with Captain Pelletier. He got a tourniquet on. Once they realized the extent of the injuries, they kind of were like, we don't need to do this. And his clothing was so tight, wrapped around his arm, his clothing was acting as a tourniquet for us. So this is where the benefit of the machine really came into play for us. We knew, looking at the other machine, that this machine was designed to flip up for cleaning. We knew we were 6 feet up. At that point, myself and the captain made a decision that we cannot get this man out at this height. So we had to come up with a plan to disassemble the machine and get it down. I had a quick conversation with the mechanic, and I asked him, I said, how do I take the machine apart? And he said, you don't. Food grade stainless steel, everything's welded together. You have to cut. Real quick. So at this point, I realized that we didn't have the equipment we needed. I called our dispatch center to wake up our public works department, get them out of bed. and I needed cutting torches. And it's 4 o'clock, 4:30 in the morning. My brain wasn't working as it should be. Quicker than realized that we didn't need cutting torches. We need a plasma cutter. So we started waking up other people. At one point, our dispatcher called back to me, and my response was, I don't care where it comes from, just get it. I need additional equipment here we don't need. So yeah, son.
Yeah, I was gonna say, at the end of the day, the challenge that this extrication was, because the equipment was custom fabricated. So this was not something that you could disassemble in its entirety and then undo the impalement and pull the victim out. That hopper paddle assembly was custom made with very few places for it to come apart. So that decision of having a mirror image equipment across from it and knowing that we were at our limits of disassembly that would gain us anything, the only next step was we have to undo what they fabricated.
That was one.
TJ, can you bring the picture up of the shaft that we cut, please?
While he's doing that, was there how far in the building were you guys?
Well, so the front door where we entered from, and this is another thing that I regret, was en route, I wish I had called and asked for our communications to call them back and ask where in the building are they? Because it's a huge building. We were lucky that if you're looking at this machine, a little bit to the left is the doorway out to the parking lot. So we did eventually move the rescue company, the rig, to that door, and we were shuttling in equipment. So
Did you do an interior tool staging area, or you use that outside?
So we did. So I'm going to talk real quick about that. So we did stage tools. I'll let these guys talk a little bit about the cutting, but I assigned at this point, they were starting to cut the shaft. We were running low on equipment, and Captain Pelletier looked at me and said, I think we need East Hartford. East Hartford is a career fire department in the next town over. They run a heavy rescue company. I made some quick conversation with my dispatch center on the radio, asked them if they have torches. Eventually I said, you know what, I don't care. Just get them here. I think we'll go into that a little more, why I thought they were a benefit, but I'll let these guys talk about what they had to deal with cutting. But if you see those two wires are what we cut for the power as well. But I'll let these guys talk a little about the difficulties of what they faced with cutting the shaft.
And for our listeners out there, remember, from the time you call a resource to the time that it gets on scene and can make a positive impact, there's a significant lag time there. So calling a resource early and then staging them so it's there when you need them to cut down that lag time is a critical thing to consider in any technical rescue.
So I could tell, obviously, from the food processing facility that we were dealing with, a high-grade stainless. My background in the machining industry, I knew it was not going to be an easy process of cutting them. And again, this was our last approach. We finalized on this plan. We knew we had to cut that hopper off of the machine. We needed to stabilize the patient who was impaled in the hopper and then remove them as an assembly so we can now work at a reasonable level on ground level. So you would think, and we had, again, a tool cache staged. We threw everything at it. Bandsaws, sawzalls, die grinders, angle cutters. That process of cutting those shafts, that shaft, but you had to cut both ends, was at least an hour.
Yeah,
At least.
And while that was happening, I could say, I don't even remember, like looking back, I don't remember them doing that because I was standing at the doorway with numerous radio transmissions trying to get them the equipment they needed. I don't ever normally check my phone at an incident. And I thought it was weird that at 4:30 in the morning, my phone beeped. And it was another local volunteer company next to us that said, hey, we got cutting torches on the rig. And I said, just start coming here. Just start heading there. So,
and the problem that we can't show, obviously, with the victim pictures is a lot of those limitations of other either torches or tools. This patient was consumed in this machine. So a lot of those other, let's call it higher horsepower tools that you would have wanted to use to get access to was just off the table because of how he was consumed in that machine. You couldn't shield enough with the blind spots of what you needed to cut. So we literally just had to invest that time in it. But the problem, I guess, like mentally for us, right? We go to a job and you might have that adrenaline that you're working on for like 20 minutes, right? Whether it's a fire, an extrication of vehicle stuff. you know, if after 20 minutes or half an hour, you haven't, you know, things are going to go bad afterwards anyways, right? It's either a defensive operation, whatever. This was still a viable rescue, and we're hours into the incident. So it was mentally exhausting when you're changing out Sawzall blades or changing out discs on the die grinder or blades on the bandsaw. But you were just seeing little progress. So you obviously a little progress at a time, and then minutes keep going by. Rotating crews around, but eventually, obviously, we got through that cut, and then the challenge afterwards was, okay, now you got it cut. You've got a approximately 200-pound victim consumed in a machine in a paddle hopper that weighs probably 250 pounds. So now, how are you going to manage a 500-pound load and get this down into an area where we can now work on the patient?
Frank, at the beginning of this, you mentioned that if you have any kind of technical rescue, it may involve multiple technical rescue disciplines in that technical rescue. This turned into a rope operation afterwards.
Yeah, so pretty much as the cutting operation, I believe the cutting operation was almost finished. But just real quick to go back what the captain was talking about, this was a first for me as the incident commander to be involved in this length and in depth of an operation. I've been a guy working on this, but I've never been in charge. And it was a huge lesson for me of not only do I need to deal with the victim, but I need to deal with the mental and emotions of my guys working. I had to start reassuring them that, guys, you're making progress. I think at one point, both of us, all three of us, gave each other looks of, are we making progress? And I had to reassure them, you are. There was definitely some things done in desperation that I think we knew weren't going to work, but I allowed it to be. I'm like, yeah, just try it. Like, I get it. Like, but it happens. But if you're a boss or you're a company officer and your guys are working, I think it's important for your job to reassure them that they're doing a good job. Like, they're doing what they're supposed to be. It's just something we're not faced with every day. So I think at this point now, East Hartford showed up. East Hartford's chief showed up. My back was to the door when he walked in, and he said some things that I can't say live. I turned around and I said some things to him I can't say live, and he was kind of like, his eyes were huge. The lieutenant of the rescue came in, and it was nice because I was in the military with him prior. So we had a good working relationship with him. I was very happy to see that it was him. Nothing against the other lieutenants of the rescue or Captain East Hartford, but knowing that guy, having a relationship with him and working with him was a huge plus. I walked Lieutenant Calcetta over to Captain Kazbak. I said, Captain Kazbak, this is Lieutenant Calcetta. Lieutenant Calcetta, this is Captain Kazbak. And then I kind of yelled out to everybody, nothing happens unless these two guys agree on it. They are now joint rescue officers. At this point, again, I kind of walked away to kind of figure out what I needed to do for the ICS stuff. And then these guys started developing a plan. I think at this point, you almost had the shop cut when you started got there. You did, right? Yeah.
I went upstairs. I say upstairs. There was a catwalk, a mezzanine above where the unit was. And now that we had more manpower as well and more equipment, I kind of took the role of going upstairs with the rest of East Hartford's crew, and we started putting together a rope system. We kind of knew that, okay, yeah, we're going to have this cut in a minute, and then where's it going to go, and how are we going to get it off? We already talked about how much the thing likely weighed. We didn't know the exact weight, but so I went upstairs with that crew. We started putting together a rope system. We built a 4-to-1 from the top pretty quickly, and just passed down webbing and other straps to the guys down below and had them kind of hook up the machine. And we were able to, once everything was cut off, lift and then lower the machine right to the floor with the patient still on it and packaged to the machine.
So we basically married the patient to the machine. So we lifted it all in one and lowered him down onto the stretcher. It was, and it wasn't a simple operation. When I walked over there, they were using hooks, they were using Halligans, they were using everything to get leverage to move it. It was a lot of weight, and we were, because of the impalements and his injuries, we were concerned about how much we were going to move this member. Lifestar at this point was huge with us. They were there the whole time. They were looking at stuff. They were doing things, and they were working right alongside of us.
That was one of the most stressful part of the operation, because by then there was a lot of resources gathered. We at that point figured out about that roller conveyor and that angle. It was cantilevered. And now
Yes.
we're talking about putting not only our weight that was already on it because we're manipulating it, but we got the weight of the hopper and the patient that we've got to put on there. So we quickly came up with and said, hey, we gotta support this cantilever, right? My nightmare scenario was something failing in that system, and on that machine, and then losing that load of that victim on there. It wasn't as easy as we're just saying about making a bridle. We had to figure out the balance of that weight of the machine with the guy's legs sticking out of it. We used, obviously webbing to make a bridle basically out of it to the high point for that 4-to-1. But then once you did that, you had to pull it off of the base of the machine. So obviously we had a raise, and then it became a lowering operation, and a lowering operation transitioned to sliding over that whole assembly, which now took a whole bunch of manpower and resources to be able to shift that 600-pound approximate weight, right? And then obviously into the lowering. And then we had the same concern with putting this assembly on that stretcher.
Yeah, I'm not an EMS
Like,
guy.
I'm
I
gonna-
claim to be.
Like, I'm going to just jump in here for a second because I think there's a lot of buried lessons that we're kind of missing out on because there's so much valuable information here. And also, we do want to make sure that we get to Augie for a few minutes to talk about the training piece. But one of the two big lessons that I think that I want to make sure that people don't learn is the on-scene communication coordination and the working with your mutual aid companies. Having an understanding of what your mutual aid companies' abilities are, what their strengths and weaknesses are, and having those relationships ahead of time. Chief Bapp, I know you had a relationship from the military with the lieutenant from East Hartford, which is phenomenal, but many don't have that. So working for a small combination department and being deputy chief in East Haven for so long, I didn't have the resources always that I needed, but I knew who had what resources around me that I can tap into. But I've also had relationships built before those incidents. So you can call them on their cell phone if the radio communications are struggling, or you can have that conversation, or you just call for some guidance. Or when they walk through the door, you're feeling good that, okay, we have a little bit of help here. We have some knowledge, and you're on that first name basis. So that on-scene communication coordination from an incident commander is key, but also working with your mutual aid companies and training ahead of these incidents is a key to success. Why don't we head over to Augie for a few minutes? I know he wants to jump in here and add a few pieces of this into it.
All right, couple things like you said, specialty equipment and pre-planning. A lot of the stuff, whether you're a company officer, chief officer, Tim mentioned this before, what happens when I run out of angle grinder discs at 2 a.m, having a cache, whether it's on the rig with your machinery rescue kit, or having a cache back at the firehouse, specialty tools to go along with the actual train itself, with all these tools and stuff. If we don't have them, like you mentioned, who does? Is there a neighboring department? Is there a regional group or team that responds to tech rescue incidents? Can they be a resource to us?
Is there a Home Depot or a Lowe's nearby?
But I guarantee they're not open at 2 a.m. You know what I mean?
I
That's
got
the tough part, is trying to establish that type of thing early on. Understanding that there may be some target hazards in your district, or this can happen in residential applications all the time. We were teaching outside of Rochester, New York a few years ago, Fairport, New York, and they had just encountered someone who got their hair stuck in a leaf blower, in the intake. Stuff that I would normally not think about, because when you think machinery, you're thinking whether it's large scale, smaller scale, like meat grinders and snow blowers. But really, no fire department district is exempt from this type of incident. So being able to pre-plan with some training, obviously, some basic tools and equipment, and then if there's something specialty like Tim mentioned, hey, they were looking for a torch. Who has a torch? Does the neighboring department have the torch? Does the DPW or the highway department have a torch? Is there a local garage that you guys, maybe if you're a volunteer organization, maybe one of your members is a part of this, body shop or mechanics shop that has a torch. But of course, going along with that, who can run the torch? So we're going to need proficiency and training, whether, it's us or if we have to bring someone in. Obviously not ideal. But that's something we're going to have to face. Having these pre-planned caches of equipment and resources. Obviously, the fire service tech rescue, this is very labor intensive. Manpower and rescuers are our greatest asset. So without people, we really are limited. So, who around us can we call? Something to go back to what Tim was talking about during his working with, having mutual aid coming in. Something that, like he said, there were certain aspects he wasn't prepared for. Thinking about operational cycles for your firefighters, for your rescuers. Not something we think of. We mentioned, working fire. We're either going offensive, defensive. It's going well, or we're going to make a parking lot, right? So this particular case, just like any other tech rescue, we have to think about our operational periods. How long are our people working? Not just, hot and cold environments, but in this particular case, are they working at height? Are they working in odd, positions that kind of tax the human body? Yes, we want to be the ones that obviously make the rescue and complete the alarm, but it may not be that way. We may need to look at the psychological and physical stress of the rescuers, cycle them out, and then however you do that, whether rehab is necessary or just a break, having them just clear their head. But something else that can go along with that to help the incident commander is some form of tactical worksheet that helps with some of those priorities, lockout, tag out, what types of energy are on this piece of machinery. Is there stored energy? What types of extrication methods are we going to use? That's something we include with our training, and we also offer it for free. To anyone that sends us an email, we can send a tactical worksheet. It just helps you kind of guide through a machinery rescue, kind of the main points. It's not there to hold your hand, but something like lockout, tag out. Oh yeah, that's something very important. It's on that sheet, just to kind of, as a basic guide. It's, I know, one more piece of paper to put in a clipboard on a rig. But it can guide people through machinery rescue incidents from start all the way to finish, including the after action type stuff.
Augie,
So-
we talked a little bit about not having enough resources and properly staging them. But as a chief officer in the city, one of our problems often was having too many people where they're
Give
not.
everyone a burlap sack and they can beat the fire out. I know the deal. But people want to do things too, like you said. We talked about would-be rescuers and people in that area. Giving people tasks is a huge thing. Whether it's something as simple as, hey, make sure there's an area set up for EMS to pull the ambulance in, or if we're doing an LZ for a helicopter, doing stuff like that. Small tasks. Hey, grab us this, grab us that. It could be tools. It could be water for cooling. Giving people tasks will occupy them. I know we're not just trying to make up work and tasks for people, but there's plenty of stuff that needs to get done. And I'm sure Tim and the guys that were on that alarm can attest to it. You can as well, for different types of alarms. But, giving people something to do, especially when you have, manpower on your side, it gives them focus and purpose.
It also cuts down on the opinion brigade. So
Well, there's always that, of course.
you
but
always
something
want to try to keep it focused. And it hasn't been mentioned today, but make sure when you have an incident like this that you do assign a safety officer, somebody who's not overly involved in the incident, who can kind of get a fresh look. And while not a safety officer, just to hit on planning real quick, when I was a company officer on a rescue, I would always make sure, even on a simple extrication, the driver was the logistics guy to set up the tools and everything, but the driver was also the plan B guy. I'm doing plan A. And then when you finally get there to see what's going on, take a quick look without my input in a sense and come up with plan B if what I'm doing is failing. So sometimes having the fire service tends sometimes to have the guy who comes up with plan A to come up with plan B and plan C. And that isn't a good recipe. We all
Exactly.
can learn from each other. What do you have to say about that?
So going along with that, go ahead, Tim. Sorry.
So Frank, I think when Frank talked about having the chauffeur be your second in command, Frank knows my chauffeur, Mark Gianelli, I think is the best in the business. And there's been plenty of times where I've come up with a plan and he's kind of looked at me and been like, yeah, I'm like, you're right. We're going to do that. So I think Augie was a chauffeur of the rescue for a long time before he stepped up into the officer world. But trust your chauffeurs, trust your men. You got to trust your men.
Going along with that, Tim, having those pre-designated riding assignments and functions, everyone we used to say when I was still there, if everyone stays in their own lane and operates based on their seating assignment, everything goes really well. Yes, there are the incidents where it goes sideways and maybe plan A or B didn't work, but that's where guys can bounce things off of each other. When I drove Rescue 1 in Syracuse, the way we kind of operate here is Tank 1 on the back end kind of runs the operation, kind of comes up with the game plan, the formula, and leads the two teams on the back end. Confers with the officer about resources, safety, stuff like that. But the driver is obviously, like we mentioned, logistics, grabbing tools, getting stuff set up. But he's also there as a second set of eyes for the officer, and also can be there for multiple additional plans if things are going sideways. Another resource, someone that can be very helpful to the incident.
Yeah, if you're a chief or a rescue boss out there and you think you have all the answers, or you haven't had to go to somebody else's plan B, you simply don't go to enough calls, because
No.
that firefighter, that officer, that chief does not exist in the American Fire Service. We're expected to know too much. One other thing that I think is important to mention that I always see as a simple problem, but tends to complicate things on any type of rescue situation, is find somebody who is not involved at all, that you can just have police the area and kind of clean things up. In other words, you got the junior firefighter, you got somebody in the volunteer department that is kind of past their prime, but is there to help out. There's so many people that can give back, and that role is so critical, because when you start working on something and you have all these tools there, especially with confined space, train, whatever, somebody starts tripping on things, just having somebody police the area that doesn't have an assigned other task. Can you speak a little to that? Because I found that to be very helpful.
So you're saying firemen make messes? Is that, having some order is 100% true, whether any type of tech rescue, including machinery rescue. Something as simple as having, let's say we have some sawzalls laid out, having a corded next to a cordless sawzall with extra batteries laid out, something very basic like that gives now the person making the cuts, the people doing the operations, options. You have corded versus cordless, fresh batteries, having someone, and that's where, when I was the driver, trying to make sure that stuff was being done, kind of behind the scenes. I'd grab a battery, replace it with one, and we'd have stuff, that was already used, charging already while we're running through the next set of the batteries. You mentioned before changing blades and discs and stuff like that, depending on what you're using. Having those things readily available, changed out. If you have some mechanical aptitude, hey, I need you to change these discs on all these tools right now. They may not be assigned to the rescue. They may just have some general mechanical aptitude, and they maybe do some stuff on the side. But giving them tasks like that definitely contributes to the cause. And then having that organization of obviously not having a pile all over. And I'm not necessarily going as far as a tarp with a label and stuff like that, but having some order to the mix. Going back to tools and equipment, having tools and equipment together, having all your battery operated tools maybe in one designated area, whether it's a Pelican case or a bin, however you deploy, all your pneumatics, stuff like that. That way, all your power sources and your bits and blades are kind of all together. It makes deployment a heck of a lot easier.
Now, Tim, the experience of your personnel that were there that day, did you rely on them? Did you find that them coming to that alarm with like previous machine shop experience, did all of that play into that rescue?
Oh, 100% too. And the challenge is, I'm sure I can say the difference between the career and the volunteer world is, in the career world, you can look at the daily riding roster and who's coming. We're lucky now that we use a program called I Am Responding, where in our duty vehicles, we have an iPad so I can see who's coming. Not everybody uses it the best to their ability, as they should, but it's a benefit to us because I can look down that list and I can look at, I got these 5 guys coming. These guys are experienced guys, they have knowledge, I feel comfortable. Or I can look at that list and say, you know what, I'm going to start East Hartford or Vernon or another mutual aid company right from the start. But knowing who was coming, hearing their voices on the radio, I knew that my training captain was coming. He's experienced. I trained him. I know he's good. The rescue captain, we grew up down the street from each other. I know he's experienced. I know he knows his job. So I felt comfortable even looking at what we had, that we were going to have a very successful incident on this.
Now, do you think the training that you guys got from and girls got from Take the Door training also played a major role in the success of this operation?
100%. I think it was so the call came in at 3:30 in the morning. I called extrication complete at 6:09 in the morning. I believe Augie's phone was chirping at 6:15 in the morning.
I'm awake that early, so it was definitely chirping. I remember it
The
very
crazy
well.
thing about it was Take the Door training was doing a class that week in New London, Connecticut. So they were in Connecticut training. So I was getting text messages pretty early on from other members of Take the Door. I got a text message from Darren Aldi, Jake Hoffman. These guys were like, "Hey, are you guys legit having a machinery call?" And I was like, "Yeah, listen, we're just cleaning up. I'll text you back in a little bit, let you know what's happening." But I told him right away, it was, if we hadn't had the training over the last few years from Take the Door, even myself, because I can tell you before I got involved with Take the Door, I was not prepared for this. Even if this came in, I think at work, I was not ready for this. But the training that we got for them 100% made this a successful rescue. The guy is alive today, saved all his body parts. We all met him. We had a recognition ceremony. We were able to talk with him. It was amazing to see him alive, and he's doing well. He's got a long road to recovery, a lot of physical therapy. But I think if it was 5 years ago, I don't know if it would have been the same. So I'm sure these guys can agree to that too as well. So absolutely.
It all comes down to training. We want to see at FDIC. We want to see out there taking classes. You always pick up 1 or 2 or 20 or 30 different things from every class. But when you get called, there's generally not time to look it up in a book. You have to have a certain level of competency to carry this through. You talked about how vital this training was. The city of New Haven benefited from you having this training as well. And we need to get this type of training throughout all the departments in the country. And one thing that I like about Take the Door training, and I haven't taken their class yet, but I see it on
not
Twitter.
yet. We'll
Not
get
yet,
you.
but
We'll get you.
I see it on Twitter. And what I like is it's hands-on props. It's not a PowerPoint slide where they're just saying, "Hey, just look at this." They take it to the next level. They put the hand in the machine and they have the student or the participant actually cutting through this and taking things apart. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because that's the key to training. And that's one of the reasons why I think P.J. Norwood is going to be so successful as director of training of the state, is because in New Haven, he knew he was in our neighboring department, but whenever I had a recruit class, he would help get us vacants so that the recruits could actually cut a hole in the roof. You can't expect somebody to go to the roof at 3 a.m. and cut a hole in it when it's on fire. They only cut it to training school. So PJ Norwood, I think, is going to do a great job with that practical hands-on training. Can you talk a little bit about how critical that is to your class? Because I think that's what's put you a notch up.
So we kind of, first of all, the Twitter stuff and that social media on Instagram, I can't claim all that. I got to shout out to Andrew Broussard, one of our senior instructors. He does a lot of that stuff for us. I'm only one person, so it's very tough, but we do put out a lot of that nitty gritty rescue stuff, and kind of how we operate is kind of a crawl, walk, run method of instruction. And we can't really expect you to perform something unless we teach it to you. And what better way than realistic props? So in our 16-hour program, day 1, you have a 2-hour lecture, the theory, the background, lockout, tag out, the, so to speak, the death by PowerPoint that we all kind of loathe when it comes to training. And then after that, we do skill sets, whether it's oxyacetylene torch, petrogen, tool familiarization, cooling, shielding, blind cutting, stuff like that. Then we go to micro scenarios in the afternoon, with very small props. And all these props and scenarios are based off real life incidents. They're not, on our day 2, I know Tim can attest to this. People get very frustrated. Day 2 is literally 4 rotations, 4 scenarios. That's it. And it still lasts the full day. And these are based off real machinery. And one of them is a rock crusher, for example. It's obviously a smaller scale from what we've seen in quarries and places like that, but trying to guesstimate, a weight of a cylinder and doing some rigging, like you mentioned, bringing other aspects of tech rescue in, which is very important. We call it the black box. It's very fresh. Tim's shaking his head. It's very frustrating to people. That's actually a conveyor belt dryer. That's what it's modeled after. We designed all of our own props from the get-go. A handful of us, Andrew Broussard, myself, and a few others can weld decently. We now work with a company called Firehouse Fabricators. I'm sure you've heard of them. They have the VES prop for windows. They actually now produce props for us. But everything is nitty gritty, ground level. It's based off of real machinery. We don't go buy, hand meat grinders and put chicken in it and stuff like that. Like, it's just, we need something that we can reset, bring to the end user. We can rotate and do several times that day. And then if a department wants to possibly get their own props, we didn't invent any of this stuff. All right. So we've taken stuff from Joey DiBernardo, different big players in the game over the years. A lot of us worked for Brotherhood Instructors years ago. We taught small machinery rescue. There's still a bunch of us that are doing it with Take the Door training now. So we've taken all these little aspects of it and using different resources within the rescue community and try to use as real world as possible.
Well,
Because
Matt,
we all-
I think that's critical, and I want you and Tim and this whole entire crew to get together and put together an article for fire engineering on this rescue and kind of how everything came together, because I think it's a great learning lesson. Is there a website or something that somebody can go to besides the Twitter page to learn more about your company?
Take the Door Training. We're on Facebook. TakeTheDoorTraining.com is our website. That's not as updated as Facebook and Instagram, but check that out. Or if you have any questions, takethedoortraining@gmail.com. I can send people those tactical worksheets. Again, it's free. We don't claim any proprietary stuff like that. The name of the game, as we know in the rescue community, is sharing. So just a quick little guide to help you navigate through a machinery rescue incident.
Augie, if you have that tactical worksheet and you send it to PJ, we can have fire engineering link it to the bottom of this show. We're getting to the witching hour. I'm going to go around the horn and have everybody say their last words. I'll start with you.
Yeah. So last thing I want to add is one of my personal biggest takeaways from the whole incident, and it was touched on by Augie with the psychological standpoint of the responders and the rescuers that are there. You also kind of have to consider the psychological standpoint of a alert and conscious, coherent patient during a 3-hour machinery rescue. Aside from a tourniquet to stop bleeding and aside from other EMS interventions, I kind of took on a role there as everyone was working. When I didn't have hands-on something going on, I would talk to the patient. I would say, it's been 5 minutes, so I better check with him. Hey, can you still hear me? Are you still with me? Are you still there? And every single time he'd either give me a thumb or he'd be able to talk to me. Additionally, if we would try something new, he would be able to communicate with us. Stop that. That's not going to work. Or that feels like it's helping. He mentioned that we had a ceremony with him involved. And that was actually something I really, really wanted to ask him, because you go to so many car accidents, you go to so many things where you're involved in direct patient care and you don't know if what you said actually helped or if it was, they didn't care. They wanted you to shut up. He said that talking to him and something I tried to do was explain what we were doing to him as we did it was significantly helpful and kind of kept him there with us, if nothing more than just hope that we had a plan and knowing that he could trust us, that we had something to do or we had a second plan in place. So talking to the patient, keeping them apprised of what's going on and what you are planning to do is, at least for this incident, was huge.
Yeah, mine is just quickly on the training. So I'm the senior guy here in terms of age. I've worked with these two for a long time.
And maturity.
Yeah. Just proud of, like Tim said, if we didn't commit to the training that we've done, kind of unique in this small volunteer organization that we're in. We train weekly. Additionally, the rescue company I'm in charge of it. I still work with these guys that help us out on it. We train at least once a month on rescue disciplines. And we definitely would not have been successful without it. So there's no substitute for training and having good people that are committed to helping make sure people learn and get better.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I can't agree with what these guys said more. I'm going to take a little bit of a free shout out for this too. But first, I want to myself congratulate PJ. I want to thank Frank for having the South Winter Fire Department on. Thank Augie Matt, who is also my boss, for joining us. But all this training we talked about is great, but you got to find it. So the South Winter Fire Department, follow us on Facebook. We host what we call the Rescue Weekend. This coming up this next year will be our third one. Our first one was small. We had Chief Isaacson come in from Florida to do a presentation. But we got big this year. Take the Door is going to be back with their machinery class. We may expand to some more classes that we've done in the past. We did machinery, heavy vehicle extrication, rope rescue with some other companies. Check us out on our Facebook. If you're in Connecticut, I definitely suggest coming to South Windsor and enjoying a nice lecture, drink some beers or whatever your choice of beverages. But again, if you're faced with this situation, be prepared for it. Get the proper quality training that you need. And it was a great outcome. And I can say that I'm proud of all the members of the South Windsor Fire Department who were there. And I thank the chief, Kevin Cooney, for allowing us to welcome the outside training into our department. One thing I can say is I don't know if I go over budget every year with my training budget, but the chief's never told me no. So if you are a chief officer and you're going to cut corners on your money, don't do it with training. Because it's besides running the calls every day, training is the most important thing you can do. With every call we've had in a town that was major, our training definitely benefited us. So, and that's it.
Very well said. PJ?
Yes, Frank, this was a great show for me. I got to sit back as a bystander, just listen to a challenging incident that was handled like I would expect in a phenomenal way by the membership and the leadership of South Windsor Department. So I'm proud of them. I'm proud of what they did. And this was great. I think there's a lot of take-home lessons. I look forward to sitting back and listening to the recorded version on fireengineering.com on their Facebook page. And I appreciate the kind words in my new role coming up effective July 2nd. As long as taking those classes with Chief Papp and his department, don't forget about the Connecticut Fire Academy. We're going to run some really cool training, and things are changing. And I'm looking forward to working with all of you and bringing Connecticut to the top of the pecking order of training in the nation, not just in the state. So I appreciate all your support and kind words, and look forward to working with each one of you to achieve that.
Very well said. Augie?
Tools and equipment are only as good as the members that are trained on it. So you can buy all the equipment in the world. This goes with any tech rescue, but without the training, it's all useless. So having the support of whatever organization you have, whether you're a small volunteer department all the way up to a large career municipal department, having that, not just the funding for the tools and equipment, but having the funding for the training as well. You got to be trained on this stuff. And beyond the baseline training, is having the company level training, practicing these skills, not just, we took a class a couple of years ago, practicing them, skill sets, also doing, scenarios as well. But also as an organization, trying to understand what your mission is. Are you guys going to be capable of this? And if you are, how do you support it? And if you're not, who are you going to call? So it's one of those things that we kind of need to, check ourselves a little bit, as an organization, are we going to be prepared to handle this type of incident, or are we going to olay it to another one? That's all I got.
Very, very well said. And we hope to see everybody at FDIC. I'll be teaching Monday, tactical leadership, increasing your command presence and building your influence. So I hope to see some people out there. This was a great show, a lot of learning lessons. And again, all skills are perishable. And we would like to think that we always rise to expectations in the fire service, only that's not true. We tend to fall to the level of our training. So the key is to get the best possible training. The last thing I'll say for politics and tactics tonight is also don't forget where you came from. If you started in the volunteer service, help out the volunteer service. It's not taken away from your job. And now with the Janus decision, they can't do anything to you if you want to volunteer. That baseball bat and that hammer is gone. The career departments and the unions benefit when their members volunteer in other jurisdictions. Now, no, due to FLSA, you cannot volunteer in the same community that you work in. It's a wage and hour issue. So that is wrong by law. However, if you're not working in the town you live in, give back to the volunteer department. You're going to get training out of it, and you'll be able to help your department as well. That's it for politics and tactics today. Augie, it was an honor having you on. PJ, congratulations. Well earned, well deserved. I expect great things from you. And Tim Papp, I'm proud of you.